A Navy SEAL came to Brightwater Ridge looking for peace, not another mission. But one snowy evening, his German Shepherd stopped beside an abandoned rescue shelter and refused to move. From inside an old barn came the faint cry of a mother dog guarding 3 freezing puppies. What he found there was not just a rescue. It was the first crack in a beautiful lie. Behind the shelter's kind promises were missing records, forgotten collars, and a truth the town had buried too long.
All right,
Tell us
easy
where
does
you're
it.
watching from.
Let's take a
And
look at this
please
tag,
like
see
and
who to call.
subscribe to help us reach 1,000
You're being very
followers.
brave.
Your support helps us create more meaningful stories. Now, let's begin. Ethan Calder had not come to Brightwater Ridge to become anyone's answer. He had come because the northern air was clean, because the lake froze blue under winter light, because the cabin his late uncle left behind sat far enough from town that silence could gather there without being interrupted by questions. After years in the Navy SEALs, Ethan had learned that people loved asking about war in the same tone they used for weather, as if storms and memories could both be described politely over coffee. Brightwater Ridge did not ask much on his first week. It simply watched him. The town rested in the northern United States like a small lantern cupped between pine forests and a frozen lake. Snow sat on the cabin roofs in soft white layers. Smoke rose from chimneys in patient ribbons. The streets were clean but not fancy, edged with salt, tire tracks, and the kind of old wooden storefronts that had survived more winters than some families had survived arguments. Beyond the last houses, the forest began quickly, dark green and silver beneath the cold sun. Ethan's cabin stood at the edge of that forest. It was a modest place with a sagging porch, a stone chimney, and windows that complained whenever the wind pressed against them. He had spent the morning fixing a loose hinge, stacking firewood, and pretending the work was just work. But every task became a kind of measurement. Door lock, window latch, blind corner near the shed, road visible from the kitchen, back exit clear. Old habits did not retire because a man signed papers. Ethan was 35, tall at about 6 feet, with a lean, compact strength that looked built for endurance rather than display. He was clean-shaven, his square jaw and defined cheekbones sharpened by the cold, his fair northern-weathered skin marked not by age but by weather, distance, and things he rarely named. His dark brown hair was cut in a neat military style, slightly longer than standard SEAL regulation now, though not by much. His gray-blue eyes stayed calm even when the rest of him did not. They had the unsettling steadiness of a man who noticed everything and judged almost nothing too quickly. He wore what his hands still reached for when the day required steadiness, an old military gray tactical combat shirt, its fabric softened by years of washing, the cuffs and shoulders lightly frayed, the color faded by weather and use. Beneath it showed a dark red thermal layer, just vivid enough to seem like a small ember beneath ash. His old earth brown and moss green combat pants were worn at the knees, the cargo pockets sagging slightly from long habit. His boots were old military work boots, scuffed and practical. On his wrist sat a scratched military watch that had survived more places than he cared to remember. Ranger waited by the door before Ethan reached for the leash. That was one of Ranger's talents, knowing what Ethan intended before Ethan admitted it. The German Shepherd was 6 years old, a strong working-line male with a cream-gray coat and natural black along his back and ears. His body was lean and powerful without being heavy, his amber eyes intelligent in a way that sometimes made Ethan feel unfairly evaluated. Ranger wore a black harness with a slightly vivid dark red trim and a sturdy top handle. He had the patience of a trained dog, the suspicion of an old soldier, and the private humor of a creature who understood humans were often very slow animals. "Don't look at me like that," Ethan said. Ranger blinked once. "Fine, you can look at me like that, The dog's tail gave a restrained sweep, as if generosity had been granted. By late afternoon, the storm that had moved through the night before had finally softened into a bright stillness. Snow clung to the pine branches. The sky was pale and clean, with sunlight spreading across the frozen lake in bands of silver. Ethan took the old road that curved behind the cabin and followed the tree line north, Ranger walking close at his left knee. The walk had become routine. 3 miles out, 3 miles back. Enough movement to quiet the body. Enough cold to make the mind focus on breath instead of ghosts. For the first half-mile, Ranger behaved normally. He tested deer tracks near the ditch, lifted his head at the distant clatter of a snowplow, and paused to inspect a fallen branch with the grave seriousness of a detective examining evidence in a murder committed by squirrels. Then he stopped, not abruptly enough to yank the leash, but completely enough that Ethan felt the change before he saw it. Ranger stood with one front paw lifted, ears forward, nose angled toward the right side of the road. Ethan followed his gaze. A narrow track broke away from the main road and disappeared through the trees. Snow had covered most of it, but not all. Fresh tire marks cut across the white surface, deep enough to show dark slush beneath. That alone made Ethan pause. The track led to the old North Haven property, a place everyone in town seemed to mention only with half a sentence. North Haven Rescue Program. Closed, people said. Tied up in paperwork, people said. Bad management. Sad story. Best not to poke at it. Ethan had passed the faded sign twice before. It leaned beyond the bend, its painted letters weathered and half hidden by pine shadow. The place had once been a dog rescue, maybe even a respected one. Now the land was supposed to be sealed off because of ownership disputes and insurance claims. A dead place, if the town was telling the truth. But dead places did not usually have fresh tire tracks. Ranger lowered his nose to the snow. His body changed again, subtly but unmistakably. The muscles along his shoulders tightened. His tail went still. He moved toward the fence line with slow care. Not excited, not hunting, alert. Ethan crouched near the tire marks. The edges were still sharp where the cold had preserved them. A truck, probably light commercial. Not old tracks, recent, maybe from that morning. Somebody came through, he murmured. Ranger did not look at him. His nose was working along the base of the fence. The fence itself was old chain link, half swallowed by snow and winter weeds. A yellowed warning sign hung crookedly from one post. Private property. No trespassing. Beyond it stood the shapes of abandoned kennel runs. A low administrative building, and farther back, a wooden storage shed, or barn, half-shadowed under the pines. Ranger suddenly pushed his nose through a gap near the bottom of the fence and inhaled hard. Then came the sound, low, deep. Not a bark, a warning. Ethan's hand moved automatically, not to a weapon, but to the leash near Ranger's harness. Easy. Ranger's ears flattened slightly, not in fear but concentration. He pawed once at the snow near the fence. Ethan brushed away the powder with his glove. Beneath it, the snow was disturbed. Not by deer, not by raccoons. There were small prints there, shallow and uneven, almost lost beneath windblown frost. Tiny paw prints. A little farther along, Ethan saw something caught on a torn wire edge, a strip of dirty cloth or burlap, stiff with frozen moisture. Near it was the faint scent Ranger had found first, something organic beneath the cold. Milk, damp fur, cheap antiseptic, and something metallic, old and thin. Not enough to alarm a town, but enough to wake every trained nerve in Ethan's body. He stood slowly and scanned the property. The front gate was chained with a new lock. That bothered him most. The rest of the fence looked tired enough to collapse under a hard stare, but the main gate wore fresh steel. Someone wanted the entrance to look secure. Someone had bothered. Ranger pulled toward the side path, not hard, but with insistence. Ethan followed the fence line until they found a narrow place where the wire had been cut and bent inward. Not enough for a man his size to pass through easily. Enough for something smaller, enough to push something through, maybe. From the property beyond came another sound. Almost nothing. A breath? A whimper? The wind moving through loose boards? Ethan held still. The forest held still with him. There it was again. A small rumhoofen sound from the wooden shed beyond the old kennel row. Ranger looked back at Ethan, and in that amber stare was no magic, no prophecy, no ghostly command from fate. Only a dog telling a man what men so often failed to understand in time. Something living was in trouble, and every second spent explaining it was a second wasted. Ethan exhaled once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I hear it." He did not break the front gate. He moved along the fence until he found where the cut wire widened near a snowbank. It took effort, and the old metal scraped his jacket, but he got through. Ranger followed with smooth, careful obedience, his harness brushing frost from the wire. Inside the fence, the North Haven property felt less abandoned than concealed. The kennel runs were empty, but not ancient. A plastic feed scoop lay near a doorway. A shovel leaned under the eaves. Snow had drifted over the path, but beneath it were older compressed tracks. Someone had been here more than once. The wooden shed stood behind the kennel row, low and weather-beaten, its side door held shut not by a proper lock, but by a board wedged through a handle. Ethan removed the board. The door opened with a tired groan. The smell came first cold wood, old straw, damp cloth, stale dog food, and the sour edge of fear. Ranger did not rush in. That told Ethan enough. He clicked on his flashlight and stepped inside. The beam moved across stacked crates, torn feed bags, a broken folding chair, and a pile of burlap sacks near the far wall. Something shifted beneath them. A growl answered the light. Weak, but real. Ethan lowered the flashlight immediately, angling it away. "Easy," he said, though he did not know whether he was speaking to the animal or to the part of himself that wanted to move too fast. Ranger sank to the floor beside him, chest low, head down, ears soft. The great shepherd became smaller by choice, a gesture no human apology could have matched. Ethan moved one sack aside. A female German shepherd lay curled in the corner, her body thin beneath a gray-brown cream coat dirtied by snow, mud, and neglect. She looked 4 or 5 years old, though exhaustion had carved more winter into her than age had earned. Her amber eyes were guarded and fever-bright. One shoulder looked swollen and tender, marked by a clean but painful-looking scrape beneath matted fur. Around her body, tucked beneath her belly and front legs, were 3 puppies. They were tiny German shepherd mixes, soft, pale cream gray with light brown tones, their ears still folded in the uncertain way of very young dogs. 2 moved weakly against their mother's warmth. The third was smaller, almost swallowed by the folds of dirty cloth. Its breath so slight Ethan had to stare to be sure it was there. The mother bared her teeth. Her lips trembled with the effort. There was no strength behind the threat, only will. Ethan felt something in his chest go very still. He had seen courage in many shapes, men running toward smoke, a medic refusing evacuation, a young operator laughing with blood on his sleeve because fear needed somewhere to go. But this thin, trembling mother using the last of herself as a wall between her children and the world struck him with a force he had no defense against. "Okay," he whispered. "You keep your ground." The dog's eyes flicked to Ranger. Ranger stayed low, looking away just enough to be respectful. His tail did not move. His mouth was closed. His whole body said, in the only language that mattered, "I am not here to take them." Ethan slowly shrugged out of his field jacket. The cold entered through his old tactical shirt immediately, sharp against the red thermal layer at his wrists and neck. He did not throw the jacket over the mother. He placed it on the floor halfway between them, then eased back. The mother watched the jacket like it might become another trap. "Your choice," Ethan said. Outside, the wind moved against the shed walls. Somewhere far off, a crow called once, rough and lonely. The smallest puppy made a sound no bigger than a thread snapping. The mother looked down. Her attention broke for half a second. That was when Ethan saw it. Not just fear, not just exhaustion, but calculation. She was deciding which danger she could survive. Him, the cold, the failing breath of her pup, hunger. The door behind him. A living creature should not have to do that much math to stay alive. Ethan reached for his phone slowly and called the number Grace Holloway at the bakery had written on a receipt 2 days before when she heard he had a dog. "For emergencies," the older woman had said, and because men who live alone with German Shepherds always pretend they don't need anyone until they absolutely do. The call rang 4 times. A woman answered, voice thick with sleep and caution. "Whitmore Veterinary." "This is Ethan Calder. I'm at the old North Haven property. I found a German Shepherd mother and 3 pups in the rear shed. They're cold. 1 pup is weak. The mother has a shoulder injury, maybe dehydration." There was a half-second silence. Then the woman's voice changed completely. "Do not move fast around her. Keep the pups with her if possible. Can you warm the area without crowding her?" "I can try. I'm coming." Dr. Clara Whitmore arrived 21 minutes later in a dented green pickup with a cracked headlight and a medical bag that looked older than good news. She was 41, medium height, practical in build, with tired gray-brown eyes that took in the world without flinching from its uglier corners. Her dark brown hair was tied low at the nape of her neck with loose strands at her temples. She wore a faded blue-gray veterinary coat over a cream sweater, dark jeans, and brown anti-slip boots dusted with road salt. She did not waste time saying "poor thing," which made Ethan trust her immediately. She paused at the shed door, reading the room the way good field medics read a casualty site. "Mother's name?" she asked quietly. "Don't know." Clara looked at the dog curled around her pups. "Then we don't steal one from her tonight." She crouched several feet away, opened her bag slowly, and slid a foil emergency blanket across the floor, not toward the dog. Near enough to offer warmth, far enough not to demand permission. Ethan understood the method. Help could be another kind of pressure if it came wearing boots. The mother growled once. Clara nodded. "Fair." Together, inch by inch, they made the corner warmer. Ethan moved crates to block the wind cutting through a gap in the boards. Ranger stayed low, a quiet sentinel with snow melting along his harness. Clara checked the weakest puppy first, only after the mother's eyes softened from panic into suspicion. "That one needs heat now," Clara said. Ethan looked at the tiny pup, then at the mother. "Can we move them?" "We move all of them. Together, it took patience. The kind that felt like kneeling before an altar built of straw, fear, and breath." Ethan wrapped his jacket beneath the mother's side while Clara kept the puppies against her body. The German Shepherd trembled but did not bite. Her eyes stayed on Ethan's hands. "I know," he said softly. "Hands have not been kind enough." Clara glanced at him once, but did not ask. By the time they carried the mother and her pups to Ethan's truck, the sky had darkened into blue evening. Snow began to fall again, light and slow, softening the old tire tracks near the fence. Ethan settled the mother on blankets in the back seat. She had almost no strength left, but one front leg still reached over the smallest puppy, shielding it from a threat that was no longer there. Ranger climbed in last. He lay down near the door, close enough to guard, far enough to respect her. As Ethan shut the truck door, he looked back at the old North Haven shed. The new lock on the front gate gleamed faintly beneath the snow. The fresh tire tracks were already disappearing. By morning, the storm would cover most of what had led them here. A careless person would see nothing. A comfortable person would believe nothing. But Ethan Calder had been trained to notice what the world tried to erase. He climbed behind the wheel, started the engine, and looked in the rearview mirror. The German Shepherd mother stared back from the blankets, eyes exhausted but unbroken. The smallest puppy moved once beneath her leg. Ranger's amber eyes met Ethan's in the mirror. No command passed between them. None was needed. Ethan drove toward the lights of Brightwater Ridge, carrying a mother, 3 pups, and the first frozen piece of a truth someone had nearly buried before any. The clinic smelled of warm towels, antiseptic, old coffee, and wet fur. To Ethan Calder, it was not an unpleasant smell. It was practical, honest. Nothing in the room pretended to be gentler than it was. The stainless steel tables were scratched from years of paws, claws, frightened bodies, and careful hands. The shelves held bottles with plain labels. The floor had been mopped recently, though road salt still left pale ghosts near the entrance where winter followed everyone inside. Dr. Clara Whitmore moved through the small veterinary clinic with the calm efficiency of a woman who had learned that panic was a luxury sick animals could not afford. She was 41, medium height, with a practical strength in her shoulders and hands. Her pale northern skin looked tired under the yellow lights, and her dark brown hair, tied low at the nape of her neck, had loose strands at the temples. Her gray-brown eyes were kind, but not soft in a useless way. They did not flinch from suffering. They measured it, named what could be named, and worked around what could not. The German Shepherd mother lay on a thick blanket near the wall, not on the examination table. Clara had made that decision the moment they arrived. A table would have made the dog feel trapped. The floor gave her choices, or at least the illusion of them, and sometimes an illusion of choice was the first bridge back to trust. The mother's gray-brown cream coat was still dirty from snow, mud, and the old shed. Meltwater darkened the blanket beneath her paws. She was thin in a way that made Ethan's jaw tighten every time he looked too long, but her eyes remained fiercely alive, amber, guarded, and tired. A mother's eyes, not pleading for herself, but counting every movement near her children. 3 puppies were tucked close to her belly, inside warm towels. 2 of them squirmed faintly, making small searching sounds. The smallest lay quieter than the others, its soft pale cream-gray fur still damp along the back, tiny ears folded, dark eyes barely opening. Its breathing came and went like a match flame threatened by wind. Ethan stood several feet away, his back near the wall, arms loose at his sides. He had not taken off his old tactical combat shirt, though the cold from the rescue still lived in the fabric. The faded military gray sleeves were damp near the cuffs. The dark red thermal layer beneath showed at his wrists and collar like a little buried heat. His combat pants were streaked with snowmelt and dust from the shed floor. His old work boots had left wet prints by the door until Clara silently pushed a towel under them with her foot. Ranger lay between Ethan and the shepherd mother. The 6-year-old German shepherd had folded himself down with deliberate care, his cream-gray coat and black saddle still dusted with melting snow. His black harness with dark red trim stayed on, the handle rising from his back like a quiet promise. Ranger did not stare at the mother. He watched the room instead, Clara's hands, the hallway, Ethan's breathing, the puppy's tiny movements. He had appointed himself guard without ceremony. That was Ranger's way. No speeches, no mythology, just a body placed between danger and the vulnerable. "She needs a name for the chart," Clara said quietly. Ethan looked at the mother. The dog's lip lifted just enough to remind him that charts were a human invention, and she had survived the night without one. "Not yet," Ethan said. "Not from me." Clara's mouth softened at one corner. Good answer. She crouched sideways, never facing the mother head-on. She slid a shallow bowl of warm water close enough for the dog to smell, far enough that taking it would not feel like surrender. The shepherd's eyes followed the bull. Her throat worked once, but she did not move. "She's dehydrated," Clara said. "Undernourished. Cold stress, too. The shoulder is swollen and scraped, but it doesn't look like a fresh, severe wound. That's something." "Something," Ethan repeated. It was a small word, too small for the animal lying in front of him, too small for the way she had kept one leg over the weakest pup, even while being carried from the truck, even when every muscle in her body had trembled with the need to collapse. Clara checked the puppies one by one with a tenderness so controlled it felt almost surgical. The smallest pup stirred under her touch and gave a thin, offended squeak. Ethan felt his lungs loosen slightly. "That one's stubborn," Clara murmured. "Good," Ethan said. The word came out rougher than he intended. Clara glanced at him, then back at the pup. "Stubborn helps." Ethan almost smiled, but the expression stopped somewhere before it reached his face. Stubborn had helped him too, though no one had called it that in the service. They had called it discipline, resilience, operational focus. Men loved giving medals to pain if it stood straight enough. But pain did not care what name was pinned to it. It lived under the ribs all the same. The smallest puppy opened its mouth, blindly, searching for warmth. The mother tried to shift toward it and winced, though she did not make a sound. Ethan saw the pain pass through her body like a shadow under ice. His hand twitched. Ranger's ear flicked toward him. Ethan stayed still. Not every instinct deserved obedience. Clara warmed a small towel, placed it near the puppies, and waited. Only after the mother's eyes settled did she reach again. No sudden touch, no leaning over the head, no ownership disguised as kindness. The clinic clock ticked above the shelves. Outside, a truck passed on the road, tires hissing through slush. The mother lifted her head instantly, ears straining, eyes wide. "Easy," Ethan said, barely above breath. The word was not a command. It was a weather report. "The storm is not here yet." The mother did not believe him. He did not blame her. About an hour after they arrived, Clara examined the dog's neck more carefully. She waited until the mother had lowered her head again, then parted the fur along the throat with 2 fingers, gentle as snow falling on glass. Ethan saw Clara's expression change. Not dramatically. Clara did not waste emotion in ways that could frighten an animal. But something in her eyes sharpened. "What?" Ethan asked. "Come look." Slowly. Ethan stepped closer, then stopped when the mother's gaze cut to him. He lowered his body slightly, turning his shoulder instead of facing her. Ranger remained still, but his eyes tracked Ethan's movement. Clara separated the fur at the side of the dog's neck. Beneath the dirty coat was a dull, uneven ring where the fur had worn thin. The skin below looked irritated in places, darker than the surrounding flesh, roughened as if something had rested there too long or moved against the same line again and again. Ethan stared at it. His mind wanted a clean answer, a collar, a rope, a chain, a tool, a crime with a shape. Clara did not give him one. There was pressure here for a long time, she said, or repeated pressure. It could have been a collar that didn't fit. Could have been a restraint. Could have been some kind of accessory. "I can't say yet." Ethan's eyes stayed on the mark. The mother watched him watching it. For a moment he felt ashamed, as if even looking too closely might be another kind of taking. He stepped back. "What kind of person lets it get that bad?" he asked. Clara's face hardened. The kind who stops seeing an animal and starts seeing a purpose. The words settled in the room. Ranger lifted his head. The mother's eyes moved from Clara to Ethan, and then to the smallest puppy. She nudged it closer with her nose, slow and careful. The pup made a weak sound, then tucked against her. Ethan did not know then why the mark on her neck would matter. He only knew it did. Some wounds were not loud, some waited under fur, under silence, under names people had not yet spoken. And then, as if the room itself wanted to answer a question no one had finished asking. The old television in the front waiting area clicked on. Ethan turned. The screen had been dark when they arrived. Now it glowed blue-white through the open doorway, casting weak light across the reception desk. A local morning program was playing low, the volume almost muted. Maybe the power strip had reset. Maybe the remote had been pressed under a stack of files. Maybe the building, old and temperamental, had its own poor timing. On the screen appeared a polished man in a winter coat, standing in front of a bright wooden sign that read Haven Fields Community Center. Clara went still. Ethan noticed. A second later, Ranger gave a low sound from his chest. Not a bark, not even a growl meant for warning. Recognition, maybe, or the shape of it. The mother saw the light before she saw the screen. Her body tightened. Her head rose from the blanket, ears pinning back. One of the puppies slipped away from her belly, and she dragged it back with sudden urgency. The television cut to a recorded segment, children in colorful coats, veterans smiling awkwardly, a cheerful host talking about healing, rescue, second chances. Then the camera widened. A German shepherd stood beside the polished man, clean coat, bright eyes made too still by tension. A red scarf or soft wrap tied around her neck for the camera. The caption beneath read, "Hope, the miracle rescue mother." Ethan's breath slowed. The dog on the screen was healthier brushed, posed beneath warm lights. But the shape of the ears, the line of the muzzle, the guarded eyes that did not look at the people touching her, those details did not belong many dogs. Her left side carried a subtle stiffness. Her weight sat just slightly wrong. The mother on the blanket began to shake. Clara moved to block part of the screen, but Ethan raised one hand. Wait. He hated himself a little for saying it, but he needed to see. On the television, the man smiled into the camera while the German shepherd kept her head slightly low. A staff member leaned in to adjust the red scarf. For half a second, the dog flinched. Not much. A viewer drinking coffee would miss it. A donor would call it charming. A man trained to notice the smallest shift before impact did not miss it. The red fabric sat exactly over the place Clara had just uncovered. Ethan looked from the screen to the mother's neck. The room seemed to narrow. Not proof. Not yet. But a door opened in his mind, and behind it stood the first outline of a truth too cold to be accidental. Clara reached the reception desk and turned the television off. The screen went black. The mother did not calm immediately. She curled around the puppies, breath fast, body rigid, every muscle braced for a room that was no longer there. Ranger shifted forward on his belly, slow as moonlight, and rested his chin on his paws. He made a small sound. Not command, not comfort exactly, but presence. The mother's eyes found him. Something in her body loosened by the width of a thread. Ethan understood then that healing did not arrive like victory. It arrived like that. One thread, one breath. One creature recognizing another creature's stillness and deciding not to run. Clara stood in the doorway, her face pale with anger. She had locked behind professionalism. "You know that program?" Ethan asked. "I know enough to wish I knew more. Tell me." Clara looked back at the blanket, at the mother, who had not stopped guarding her pups, even while the past reached through a television screen and touched her. North Haven used to be the town's pride, Clara said. A rescue program. Dogs from bad situations, veterans who needed companionship, kids who needed something gentle to trust. At least that was the story. At least. Clara crossed her arms, then seemed to realize the posture looked defensive and let them fall. After North Haven closed, the money and public image moved into Haven Fields. Dr. Warren Holt runs it now. Educated, polished, always photographed standing next to someone vulnerable enough to make him look necessary. Ethan said nothing. Clara continued. Some dogs were adopted out properly. I know that. I treated a few. But others appeared in campaigns and then vanished from public records. Whenever I asked, I heard the same language: transferred, specialized care, private placement, administrative restructuring. Did you report it? Yes. The answer came fast enough to show the wound beneath it. And? No specific animal I could prove was in danger, no access to private facilities, no owner complaining, no body, no active abuse in front of me. Clara's mouth tightened. Paperwork can bury a living thing very quietly if everyone agrees to read it slowly. Ethan looked at the mother. Hope, the television had called her. But Hope was not what he saw, not the clean, marketable kind. He saw a mother who had been made to stand under lights until fear learned the shape of applause. He saw a mark under her fur that might have come from a beautiful thing used badly. He saw 3 puppies who had not asked to be born into someone else's discarded story. The smallest puppy stirred again. Ethan crouched slightly. That one needs a name. Clara's eyebrow lifted. 5 minutes ago you said not yet. That was for her. The mother watched him. He kept his eyes low, voice softer than the hum of the heater. Milo, he said. For the little one, unless she objects. The mother did not approve. She did not soften. She did not suddenly trust him because he had given her pup a gentle name. But she also did not growl. Ranger's tail gave one small thump against the floor. Clara breathed out through her nose. Milo it is. For the first time that night, Ethan felt something almost warm move through the room. Not relief. Relief would have been too large, too careless. This was smaller, and therefore stronger. A candle cupped against wind. The hours that followed were quiet but not peaceful. Clara set up a warming plan. Small amounts of fluid, careful feeding, and instructions sharp enough to cut through Ethan's instinct to do too much. No crowding, no sudden touch. No praise if praise made pressure. Keep the puppies close. Let the mother choose what she could choose. Warmth without ownership. Ethan listened. He had followed orders his entire adult life, but these felt different. Not commands designed to take ground, instructions designed to give ground back. Before dawn, the mother finally drank. Only 3 laps. Then she stopped and looked at Ethan as if daring him to celebrate. He did not move. Behind him, Clara whispered, "Good." The mother ignored her. Ranger blinked, unimpressed by human restraint. Ethan sat on the floor with his back against the wall, the old red thermal at his cuffs. Dry now, the smell of the shed still caught faintly in his clothes. His body ached from kneeling, lifting, waiting. Waiting was always harder than action. A man could train for storms, gunfire, extraction, the clean violence of decisions made in seconds. But there was no training manual for sitting 3 feet from a frightened mother while trust decided whether it could survive another day. When the first gray light touched the clinic windows, Clara brought him a mug of coffee that tasted like burned bark and mercy. Ethan took it with both hands. "What happens now?" he asked. Clara looked at the dog on the blanket. The shepherd mother had dozed, though one eye opened whenever a puppy moved. The mark on her neck was hidden again beneath fur, but Ethan could still see it in his mind. "Now she lives through the morning," Clara said. "Then the next one. And Haven Fields?" Clara's eyes turned toward the dark television. "That," she said, "is a different kind of wound." Ethan understood. He watched the mother breathe, watched Milo's tiny body press closer to her warmth, watched Ranger keep guard as if the clinic were a sacred fort built from towels, old linoleum, and stubborn mercy. He had thought, when Ranger stopped at the fence, that he was saving a dog from winter. Now he knew winter had only been the surface. Someone had once called this mother Hope, dressed her for cameras, and placed her in front of applause. Somehow she had ended up nameless in a shed with 3 puppies and a wound around her neck that no longer needed to speak to be heard. Ethan set the coffee down. Outside, Brightwater Ridge began to wake beneath a pale northern sunrise. Inside, beside the blanket, Ranger lifted his head and looked toward the closed television, as if the dark screen still smelled of a lie. Ethan followed his gaze. "All right," he said quietly. The mother opened one amber eye. Ethan looked back at her, not promising rescue in a language too easy for humans. He had already learned that promises had to become actions before they deserved to be believed. So he said only what the room could hold. "We'll go slow." And for that morning, by mid-morning, Brightwater Ridge had learned how to shine again. The storm had moved east, leaving the town polished under a thin northern souse. Snow rested on the roofs like clean linen. Icicles hung from the bakery awning, catching light in brief blue flashes. Along the road to Havenfield's community center, plowbanks rose in uneven walls, packed with old salt and pine needles. The frozen lake showed through the trees in pale strips, a blue eye half closed beneath winter. Ethan Calder drove with both hands on the wheel. Ranger sat in the passenger seat beside him, his black harness with dark red trim still clipped in place, amber eyes fixed ahead. The 6-year-old German Shepherd had been quiet since leaving Clara's clinic. Quiet was normal for Ranger. But this was not the comfortable silence of a trained dog resting between tasks. This silence had edges. Ethan knew the difference. Behind them, back at the clinic, the German Shepherd mother lay with her puppies under warmed towels. Clara had not wanted Ethan to leave for long, and neither had Ethan. But the image from the old broadcast would not let him sit still. The dog in the video, the red scarf, the mark hidden beneath fur, the polished man smiling beside her as if goodness were something that could be worn like a winter coat. All of it had turned in Ethan's mind through the night. He had slept maybe 40 minutes in a chair near the clinic wall. Ranger had not slept much either. Now, as the road climbed toward Haven Fields, Ethan felt the old discipline settle into his shoulders, not rage. Rage was a poor driver. Rage missed details. Rage looked for something to hit and became useful only to the people waiting for it to swing. So he kept his face calm. He watched the road. He remembered everything. Haven Fields Community Center appeared beyond a stand of pines, bright and orderly against the snow. It was not large enough to be grand, but every line of it had been designed to look generous. Fresh cedar siding, wide windows. A stone path cleared perfectly from the parking lot. Flags moving softly in the wind. A carved wooden sign near the entrance showed 2 hands cupping a paw print beneath the words, "Healing through companionship." Ethan parked beside a row of clean SUVs. Ranger stepped down from the truck without being told, his paws landing soundlessly in the packed snow. He did not pull. He did not sniff wildly. He simply stood beside Ethan and looked at the building. "That bad?" Ethan asked quietly. Ranger's ears shifted forward. Ethan gave a humorless breath. "Yeah, me too." Inside, Haven Fields smelled of cedar polish, cinnamon air freshener, and fresh coffee. Too much warmth. Too much intention. The lobby walls were covered with framed photographs. Children smiling beside calm dogs, elderly veterans touching shepherd ears, donors in wool coats laughing beneath strings of lights. Every image had been chosen carefully. Every frame said, "Look how kind we are. Look how healing looks when properly lit." A woman at the front desk looked up. She was young, maybe 22, with a round face, nervous eyes, and blonde hair pinned too tightly behind her ears. Her name tag read Bethany. Her smile appeared quickly, then hesitated when she saw Ranger. "Can I help you?" "Ethan Calder. I called earlier." The name did not seem to mean anything to her. Then a door opened beyond the reception area. The man who stepped out looked exactly like someone who had practiced being trusted. Dr. Warren Holt was in his mid-50s, refined and controlled, with neatly combed silver gray hair and a handsome, polished face that seemed built for brochures. His skin was pale in the way of men who spent winter near windows rather than wind. His eyes were a cold blue-gray, calm and public-facing, trained to soften without warming. He wore a premium charcoal winter coat over a black turtleneck, dark dress trousers, clean black leather shoes, and black gloves he removed slowly as he approached, as if even that motion deserved witness. "Mr. Calder," he said. "Dr. Whitmore mentioned you might stop by." His voice was smooth, almost gentle. Ethan shook his hand. Warren's grip was dry, measured, and brief. "Dr. Holt, and this must be Ranger." Warren lowered his gaze toward the dog, smiling with careful admiration. Magnificent animal. Ranger did not move closer. Warren noticed. His smile did not change. "I understand you served," Warren continued. "Navy SEAL, if I'm not mistaken." "That's right. Then first, thank you. Truly. Men like you carry more than most communities ever see." The words were polished enough to pass as respect. Ethan heard the other thing beneath them. A measuring. A man arranging the room before the conversation began. "I'm here about a German Shepherd," Ethan said. "Female. 4 or 5 years old. Gray-brown cream coat. She may have been called Hope in your program." Something shifted behind Warren's eyes. Not surprise. Recognition wearing a coat. "Hope," Warren repeated softly. "That name was used in one of our older campaigns. North Haven had many animals come through before the restructuring." "Is she yours?" Warren sighed, not with fatigue, but with the practiced sorrow of a man about to disappoint someone beautifully. "That depends on which records survived." North Haven's closure was difficult. Financial strain, staffing problems, incomplete documentation. Some dogs were adopted locally. Some were transferred to partner facilities. Some cases, unfortunately, were absorbed into broader administrative reviews. "Absorbed," Ethan said. Warren's expression softened. "Bureaucracy has ugly words for human work." Before Ethan could answer, footsteps sounded from the hallway. A woman approached carrying a black binder against her chest. Lydia Crane looked late 30s or early 40s, slender and severe, with a pale, composed face and cool, precise eyes that seemed to file every person she met into categories. Her ash-brown hair was pulled into a neat low bun, so smooth it looked like it had been disciplined into place. She wore a dark charcoal tailored winter coat, a black turtleneck, slim dark trousers, clean ankle boots, black gloves, and the kind of expression that made kindness look inefficient. "Mr. Calder," she said. "Lydia Crane, operations manager." Her handshake was brief, colder than Warren's, and more honest because of it. "I asked about Hope," Ethan said. "Yes, Dr. Holt told me." Lydia opened the binder as though the answer already lived there and merely needed permission to emerge. The animal asset associated with that campaign belonged to the former North Haven program prior to restructuring. Ethan felt Ranger's weight shift beside him. "Animal asset," he repeated. Lydia looked up. "That is the term used in the legacy inventory." "Dogs," Ethan said. "The word is dogs." For the first time, Warren stepped in gently. "Of course, Lydia's language can be procedural. We deal with grants, insurance, safety audits. It has made us terribly dull at times." His smile invited Ethan to join the joke. Ethan did not. Lydia turned a page. "I don't have complete records on a Hope immediately available. There were transfers during the closure, emergency placements, a few specialized behavioral cases. Where? That would require review. Review it." Lydia's gaze cooled further. "There are privacy and liability concerns." Ethan held her stare for a second longer than courtesy required. Then Ranger made a sound. Low, not loud, but deep enough that Bethany at the front desk stopped typing. The dog was no longer looking at Warren or Lydia. He was looking down the side hallway, beyond a half-open door. Ethan followed his gaze. A narrow corridor led toward the back of the building. The public photographs ended there. The lighting changed, too, from warm lobby gold to colder utility white. At the end of the hallway was a heavy door with a keypad lock. Ranger took one step. Service area, Lydia said immediately. Ethan did not move. He smells something. Cleaning supplies, likely. Warren gave a small, apologetic smile. We had maintenance in this morning. Ranger took another step. Ethan let him. The shepherd moved slowly, nose low, not pulling, not performing. His ears remained forward, tail still. At the door, he lowered his muzzle to the seam and inhaled once, deeply. Then he looked up at Ethan. There was no bark, no drama, only that fixed amber stare that said, "This belongs to the same story." Ethan smelled it then, faintly beneath the sharp chemical wash. Bleach. Too fresh, too aggressive. The kind used not to clean, but to erase. Lydia closed the binder with a soft clap. That area is restricted. Warren's smile had grown thinner. Mr. Calder, I do understand your concern, but I'm sure you appreciate that we can't allow visitors into secured operational spaces. Was Hope kept back there? Lydia answered before Warren could. I cannot confirm the location of a former program animal without proper review. That wasn't no. It also wasn't yes. Ranger touched the door with one paw. Bethany inhaled sharply from the lobby. The sound of claw on painted metal was small, but it struck Ethan harder than it should have. Not because the door opened. It did not. Not because anything dramatic happened. Nothing did. But for one brief second, the whole building seemed to hold its breath. The framed smiles, the polished floors, Warren's calm face, Lydia's binder, Ranger's paw against the locked door. A dog did not understand donors, liability, campaign language, or restructuring. A dog understood scent, and scent, unlike people, did not know how to lie politely. Warren's voice broke the moment. I think we've reached the limit of what we can discuss informally. Ethan unclipped one finger from the leash, then closed it again. Calm. Always calm. I'll be back with questions. I'd prefer, Warren said gently, that future communication go through proper channels. For everyone's benefit. There it was. The velvet rope becoming a fence. Ethan looked from Warren to Lydia. Proper channels buried her once. The lobby went still. Warren's smile did not disappear, but something human left it. We don't know that, Mr. Calder. No, Ethan said. Not yet. He turned and walked out with Ranger at his side. Outside, cold air struck clean across his face. Ethan welcomed it. The lobby had been too warm, too scented, too careful. Snow and Pine did not pretend. He drove down from Haven Fields without speaking. Ranger sat beside him, occasionally lifting his nose toward the open crack in the window, as if chasing a thread of scent the building had tried to cut. Ethan did not go back to the clinic immediately. He drove toward the lake. Miles Ketter lived near the old public boat launch, where fishing shacks sat locked for winter, and the wind came off the ice with teeth. His house was small, brown, and tired, with plastic sheeting over two windows, and a rusted snowblower half buried beside the porch. A stack of split wood leaned badly near the steps. The place looked as if it had spent years promising to hold together one more season. Miles opened the door after Ethan knocked twice. He was 52, though hardship had made him look older in uneven places. He was slightly thin but still broad across the shoulders, with a hollow, tired face, very short gray-brown stubble, thinning brown-gray hair under a gray knit cap, and pale blue eyes that seemed permanently braced for bad news. His hands were rough and cracked, the hands of a man who had fixed locks, engines, pipes, and mistakes no one thanked him for catching. He wore an old dark brown canvas jacket with fleece lining, a red-black flannel shirt, faded jeans, work boots, and cracked leather gloves tucked into one pocket. When he saw Ethan, his face shut down. I don't know anything, Miles said. Ethan held up both hands slightly. You don't know what I'm asking. I know enough to know I don't know anything. Ranger stood quietly at Ethan's side. Miles looked at the dog and swallowed. I'm not here to corner you, Ethan said. I found a female German shepherd, near the old North Haven property. 3 pups with her. Miles's eyes flicked once, fast as a match, and struck. Then they went flat again. Lots of strays in winter. Ethan took a folded photo from his jacket pocket. Clara had printed it before he left, not for sentiment, but because a face could move where questions could not. The photo showed the mother lying on clean blankets, thin but alive, her 3 puppies close. Milo's tiny head rested against her foreleg. Ethan held it out. Miles did not take it at first. Then he did. The color drained from his face so quickly Ethan almost stepped forward. Miles stared at the photo. His thumb touched the edge, not the dog, as if even the paper might accuse him. "Hope," he whispered. Ethan said nothing. Miles sat down on the porch step without meaning to. Snow dusted his boots. The wind moved around them, hard and bright off the lake. "She was always looking at doors," Miles said. His voice sounded thinner now, stripped of the defensive bark. Every event. Didn't matter how many treats they gave her. Didn't matter how pretty they made the scarf. She looked for exits. "Who moved her?" Miles closed his eyes. "I can't do this. You already are." "No." His jaw worked. "You don't understand. I fixed things, that's all. Locks, gates, heaters. I drove sometimes. I wasn't part of whatever you think this is." "What do you think it is?" Miles looked at the photo again. The question broke something small in him. He stood abruptly, went inside, and left the door open. Ethan waited on the porch. Ranger sat in the snow, gaze fixed on the dark doorway. Miles returned carrying a stained maintenance ledger bound in cracked black vinyl. He held it like a thing dug from a grave. "I kept this because I keep records," he said. "Always have. My wife used to say I'd write down the weather if the clouds gave me a receipt." His mouth tried to smile and failed. She was sick back then. Medical bills. Lydia knew. Warren knew. They gave me extra shifts, night calls, gate work, no questions. I told myself that was kindness. He opened the ledger with shaking fingers. The pages were lined with dates, job notes, initials, vehicle plates, kennel codes, boring words, useful words, the kind no one framed in a lobby. Miles turned to a page marked with old coffee and a smudged thumbprint. There, Ethan read the line, H17, Hope Ridge Gate opened 10:42 p.m. Van plate 6KJ318 ordered by LC. Transfer completed. The wind seemed to drop away. "You opened the gate," Ethan said. Miles nodded once. "I didn't load her. I didn't touch her. Lydia said she was going somewhere quiet. Said she'd had a bad donor incident, needed specialized placement. I wanted to believe that." "Did you?" Miles' face twisted. "I signed the transfer sheet. That was the answer." The guilt did not come from cruelty. It came from the ordinary cowardice that wears work gloves and tells itself it is only doing a job. Ethan saw it clearly now. Miles had not been the hand that built the machine, but he had oiled one of its hinges. He had opened a gate. He had written completed beside a living creature and gone home to his sick wife, carrying a paycheck and a silence. Miles pressed the heel of one hand against his eye. "I kept seeing her after that," he said. "Not real, just in my head. Looking at doors, I told myself dogs get moved all the time. I told myself if Clara had a problem, Clara would fix it. I told myself a lot of things." Ethan took the ledger carefully. "Why show me now?" Miles looked toward Ranger. The shepherd sat very still, amber eyes steady, snow collecting on his ears. He did not judge like a man. That somehow made it worse. "Because she lived," Miles said, "and that means what I did isn't buried yet." Ethan looked back at the photo of the mother and puppies. No forgiveness rose in him. Not yet. Forgiveness was not a coin to hand out because someone felt bad, but neither did he feel the clean satisfaction of blame. Miles was too small for all of it, too human, too late, but not useless. "You can make a copy of this?" Ethan asked. Miles nodded. "I'll need the original eventually." Miles swallowed. "If I give it, Lydia will know. She probably already does. A bitter laugh escaped him. You military types always this comforting? Only on good days. The faintest ghost of humor crossed Miles's face and vanished. By the time Ethan returned to Clara's clinic, afternoon had begun to dim. The sun had slid low behind the pines, turning the snowbanks lavender at the edges. He carried the copied pages inside his jacket, close enough to feel their stiff corners when he moved. Clara met him in the treatment room. She had changed the mother's bedding. The 3 puppies slept in a cluster. Warmer now, bellies gently rounded from careful feeding. Milo was still small, still fragile, but his breath had steadied. The mother watched Ethan enter. She did not growl. That felt like more than he deserved. Clara looked at his face. You found something. Maybe he gave her the ledger copy. She read it once, then again. At the line marked H17, her eyes stopped. Wait, she said. She crossed to the cabinet, retrieved a small sealed sample bag, and held it up. Inside was the tiny metal fragment she had found, tangled near the old irritated fur at the mother's neck while cleaning her earlier. It was dull, scratched, and incomplete, but a few stamped characters remained. H17. Clara looked from the fragment to the ledger. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The mother shifted on the blanket and placed her chin over Milo and the other pups. Her amber eyes stayed on Ethan, not trusting him. Not yet, but no longer looking through him as if he were only another shape in a dangerous room. Ranger moved to the edge of the blanket and stopped. The mother watched him. Ranger lowered his head. Slowly, with exhaustion more than permission, she allowed the distance to remain. Ethan looked at the fragment, then at the ledger, then at the dog who had once been turned into a campaign name and moved through a back gate into the dark. The truth was still small. A code, a plate number, a man's shaking memory, a dog alive when perhaps someone had counted on Winter to finish the paperwork. Small things. But Ethan had learned long ago that every avalanche began as something small, somewhere high and silent, waiting for enough weight to move. Clara sealed the ledger copy in a folder. "What now?" she asked. Ethan looked toward the mother. Her eyes were open. This time when he answered, he did not look away. "Now we make sure no one gets to—" By noon, the folder on Dr. Clara Whitmore's desk had become heavier than paper should have been. Inside were copies of Miles Ketter's maintenance ledger, the photograph of the German Shepherd mother and her pups, Clara's first medical notes, and the small sealed bag containing the worn metal fragment marked H17. None of it was enough to end anything. Ethan Calder knew that. Evidence, like trust, had to be built in layers. One page did not make a case. One frightened dog did not make a town brave. But it was enough to make someone nervous. The proof came in a cream-colored envelope, delivered by a courier who refused to step fully inside the clinic. Clara took it at the front desk with one eyebrow raised. "If it bites, I'm sending it back." The courier, a skinny man in his 20s with a red nose, and the frightened posture of someone paid by the errand, not the courage, only mumbled, "Signature required." Ethan stood near the treatment room door, Ranger beside him. The German Shepherd mother lay on fresh blankets inside, her 3 puppies tucked against her belly. She had not been named yet. Ethan still refused to take that from her too soon. Milo, the smallest pup, had survived the night, though his little body still seemed built from breath and stubbornness. The other 2 puppies had begun to push clumsily at their mother with soft, blind determination. The mother watched every sound in the clinic. The courier's voice made her lift her head. Ranger shifted once, placing himself between the doorway and the treatment room. His cream-gray coat caught the clinic light, black saddle dark across his back, amber eyes calm but sharply awake. The harness handle rose from his shoulders like the grip of a shield. Clara signed for the envelope and carried it to her office. Ethan followed. She slid it open with a scalpel because, as she said, If this is going to ruin my morning, it can at least be opened professionally. The letter was short. That made it worse. The language was polished, careful, and cold. The dog known as Hope had been part of the former North Haven Rescue Program and associated with Haven Fields Community Center. Given her undocumented removal, incomplete behavioral history, and possible risk to public safety, she was to be returned to a qualified care environment for assessment. Continued interference, the letter warned, could result in legal action. No threats with raised voices. No accusations ugly enough to fight bare-handed. Just velvet wrapped around a chain. Clara read it once. Then again, her mouth flattened until it looked carved. "They're not claiming they love her," Ethan said. "No," Clara replied. "They're claiming they manage her. And if they manage her, they erase her." Clara folded the letter and set it beside the H-17 and evidence bag. Warren didn't waste time. He's scared. "People like Warren don't get scared," Clara said. "They get procedural." That was when Deputy Jonah Reed arrived. He was 29, tall and thin, with fair skin reddened by cold, and the serious face of a young man still deciding whether the badge on his chest was heavier than the town that had pinned it there. His blonde-brown hair was neatly cut beneath his winter patrol cap. His eyes were warm brown, inexperienced in some ways, but not empty. He wore a dark blue winter deputy uniform under a thick sheriff jacket, black snow boots, black leather gloves, a shoulder radio, and the stiff posture of someone trying very hard not to look uncertain. He took his cap off when he entered the treatment room. That was the first thing Ethan liked about him. Jonah saw the mother dog on the blanket. He saw the puppies. He saw how thin she was, how her foreleg curved over them, though she had almost no strength to waste. His expression changed, not dramatically, but honestly. "Dr. Whitmore," he said. "Mr. Calder." "Deputy," Ethan replied. Jonah looked at the folder on Clara's desk. "I got a call from Haven Fields' attorney." "Of course you did," Clara said. Jonah did not defend the call. That was the second thing Ethan liked. "They're requesting a welfare and safety review," Jonah said. "They're saying the dog may be unstable." At the word unstable, the mother's ears twitched. She did not understand the word, perhaps, but she knew tone. She knew rooms where humans decided things, while animals had to endure the consequences. Ethan lowered his voice. "She hasn't threatened anyone who gave her space." Jonah nodded slowly. "I can see that. But if we refuse to document, they'll say you're hiding her." Clara crossed her arms. "So document." "I intend to." He took out a small notebook, then stopped himself. Instead of stepping forward, he crouched near the doorway, several feet from the blanket. He kept his body angled away from the mother. "Is this far enough?" he asked Clara. Clara's expression softened by half a degree. "Far enough." The mother watched him. Her lip lifted slightly, but no growl came. Jonah wrote carefully. "Condition on discovery. Current treatment. Evidence of dehydration. Underweight. Shoulder swelling and superficial scrape. Puppies present. No immediate aggressive approach observed." He asked questions. Clara answered. Ethan stood quietly unless asked directly. Then Jonah saw the letter. He read it with his jaw tightening. "They'll push this," he said. "How hard?" Ethan asked. Jonah looked toward the window, where snowlight lay across the sill. "Haven Fields funds winter equipment for the department, covered half the cost of our new patrol tires, sponsors the veterans' breakfast, paid for school coats last year." He folded the letter. That hard. The room went quiet. There it was, the true collar around Brightwater Ridge, not cruelty, dependence. Ethan understood that kind of pressure. In war, it wore different clothes, supply lines, command politics. The quiet knowledge that survival often came through the hands of men you did not trust. In towns, it looked like donations, contracts, scholarships, repairs made before winter. Jonah looked ashamed of saying it aloud. Ethan respected him more for saying it anyway. Before anyone could answer, the clinic door opened hard enough to ring the little bell over the entrance. A woman's voice called, "If anyone in here is dying, do it after lunch." I brought soup. Grace Holloway entered like a weather system carrying a casserole. She was in her 60s, slightly plump, with brown and silver hair pinned into a loose low bun, and a kind face sharpened by eyes that missed very little. Her cheeks were red from the cold and the heat of ovens. Flour dusted the front of her light brown apron, worn over a thick cream sweater and dark pants. A moss-green knit scarf wrapped her neck, and her low anti-slip boots tracked a faint line of snow across the clinic floor. Her hands were rough baker's hands, broad, capable, and dusted with the memory of dough even when clean. She looked at Ethan first, then Clara, then Jonah. "Oh, good," she said. "Law, medicine, and military brooding. All the cheerful ingredients." Clara took the soup container from her. "You didn't have to. I know. That's what gives it moral value." Grace peered into the treatment room. The mother dog lifted her head. For once, Grace did not joke. Her face changed, not into pity, something older and steadier than pity. The look of a woman who had spent years feeding people who said they were not hungry. "Well," Grace said softly, "aren't you a queen dragged through a ditch?" The mother stared at her. Grace did not move closer. "Fair. I also dislike strangers before coffee." Milo made a tiny sound from under the towel. Grace put one hand over her chest. "That one sounds like a squeaky hinge with opinions." Despite himself, Ethan almost smiled. Grace saw it and pointed at him. "Don't start looking relieved. Men get one rescued dog near them and suddenly think they've become saints. Eat soup first, then perform miracles." The warmth she brought was not gentle in the usual way. It entered like a broom, sweeping the stale fear out of the corners. Even Jonah looked less rigid. Then Grace noticed the letter. She read 3 lines and snorted. "Qualified care environment. That's a fancy way of saying, give us back the thing that makes us look bad." "Grace," Clara warned. "What?" "I'm old, not decorative." Jonah rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This needs to stay careful." Grace's sharp eyes moved to him. "Careful is useful, deputy. Quiet is not the same thing." That sentence landed harder than she likely intended. Jonah looked down at his notebook. Ethan watched him absorb it. Later that afternoon, Grace did what no one had asked her to do and exactly what everyone needed. She returned to Holloway Hearth, her bakery on Main Street, and hung a sign in the front window. Blankets, food, and medicine for Nova and her puppies. Ethan saw it when Clara sent him to pick up more broth. He stood outside the bakery, reading the sign twice. Nova. Grace had named her. Or perhaps she had recognized that the nameless space had become too cold to leave empty. Ethan felt a brief resistance rise in him. He had promised himself not to take the mother's name from her. But the word sat there in black marker, simple and bright, not like a campaign title, not like a product. Nova, starve after collapse, a light born from pressure. Inside the bakery, Grace saw him staring through the window and opened the door. "Don't glare at my sign. It's better looking than you. You named her." "I gave people something to write on a donation box," Grace said. "If she objects, she may file a complaint after recovery." Ethan looked back at the sign. "Nova," he said. "Means new, doesn't it?" Grace leaned against the doorframe. "Or exploding star. Either way, suits her." The town did not rush to help. Brightwater Ridge was not a storybook village where courage sprang fully grown by sundown. People passed the bakery and slowed. They read the sign. Some glanced over their shoulders toward the road that led to Haven Fields. A few moved on quickly, as if compassion might be contagious and expensive. But just before dusk, someone left a folded blanket outside the bakery door. No note. An hour later, a bag of puppy formula appeared beside it. Then a small box of clean towels. Then a child's drawing, taped crookedly to the glass. A large dog lying under a yellow sun, 3 puppies beside her. And a man with very long legs standing next to a German shepherd labeled Ranger. The spelling was wrong. The feeling was not. Grace stood beside Ethan in the bakery window, arms crossed. "Small-town courage," she said. "Comes in ashamed and leaves before you can thank it. It's a start. It had better be. My doorstep is not a warehouse." But her voice warmed around the complaint. That night, the clinic settled into a fragile rhythm. Clara monitored Nova and the puppies. Jonah filed his initial report. Ethan sat in the treatment room with Ranger, keeping his movements slow, his voice low. Nova had accepted the name only in the sense that she had not bitten anyone for using it. That was enough for now. Milo slept against her belly, his small ribs moving steadily. Outside, the town lights reflected off the snow. Near 10, Clara went to the back room to check supplies. Ethan had just leaned forward to refill Ranger's water when the shepherd's body changed. Ranger rose without sound, not fast, not loud, simply awake in every muscle. Ethan froze. From the rear entrance came the faintest metallic scrape. Once. Then again. Nova's head lifted from the blanket. Her body drew around the puppies. Ethan raised one hand toward her, palm down, not touching. "Stay with them." Ranger moved toward the back hall, low and silent. Ethan followed, every old part of him returning with terrible ease. Breath controlled, weight balanced, eyes taking in reflections in glass, shadows under doors, the distance between sound and source. The rear door handle shifted. Someone outside was trying to open it. Ethan stepped to the side of the door instead of standing in front of it. Ranger positioned himself near his knee, teeth hidden, chest still. The lock clicked once but held. Then the person outside heard something. Perhaps Ranger's breath, perhaps Ethan's boot on the old floorboards. The handle released. Footsteps ran down the back steps. Ethan opened the door and stepped out into the cold. A figure in a dark coat disappeared around the alley, too far to catch without leaving the clinic exposed. Ethan did not chase. That was what anger wanted. The dogs were behind him. The clinic mattered more than a shadow. Ranger stood at the threshold, nose lifted. On the top step lay a strip of red fabric attached to an old collar piece. A small tag swung from it, turning slowly in the porch light. Hope, North Haven Ambassador Dog. Ethan did not touch it with bare hands. Clara came up behind him. "What is it?" He crouched, using a clean towel from the shelf near the door to lift the collar piece. Inside the clinic, Nova saw the red. The sound she made was not loud. That made it worse. A thin, broken growl rose from her chest as she dragged the puppies closer, eyes wide, body trembling so hard the blanket shifted under her. Ethan immediately turned his back, blocking her view. "Clara, I've got it." Clara took the collar piece and sealed it in a plastic evidence bag from her medical cabinet. Her face had gone pale with anger. Ranger returned to Nova's doorway and lay down across the entrance like a living threshold. Ethan looked at Jonah's number on his phone, then at the red strip sealed in plastic. The town had left blankets at the bakery by dusk. By night, someone had left a warning at the clinic. Brightwater Ridge was waking, yes, but so was whatever had kept it asleep. When Deputy Jonah Reed returned 20 minutes later, his hair damp with snow and his jacket half-buttoned, he looked at the evidence bag and then at Nova, still trembling around her pups. This time, his young face hardened, not with rage, with decision. "I can request an administrative welfare inspection," he said. "Not a raid. Not yet. But with Clara's report, Miles's ledger, the H-17 fragment, and this," he tapped the edge of the bag. "I can open the first door." Ethan looked toward Nova. She had lowered her head again, but her eyes remained open. Milo slept beneath her chin, unaware that humans were finally beginning to do the slow, difficult work they should have done long before he was born. Grace's sign had asked for blankets, food, and medicine. But Ethan understood now that the town needed something else too. A spine. He looked at Jonah. Then open it. Jonah nodded once. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft as ash, covering the alley where the shadow had vanished. Inside, under the old clinic lights, Ranger kept watch at Nova's door while Ethan stood beside the evidence bag and felt the story change shape. It was no longer only a rescue. It was the morning after the clinic door was touched by a stranger. Brightwater Ridge looked innocent again. That was what unsettled Ethan Calder most. Snow softened the rooftops. Sunlight turned the frozen edges of the road pale gold. Smoke rose from chimneys in calm ribbons, as if the town had slept through the night without fear pressing its palm against a back door. Outside Holloway hearth, a cardboard box overflowed with towels, puppy formula, and 2 bags of dog food. Someone had added a small handwritten note that said, "For Nova. Sorry we were late." Ethan read it once and did not pick it up. Some apologies needed to sit where they were placed. At the clinic, Nova lay close to her pups, her gray-brown cream coat cleaner than it had been when Ethan found her, though exhaustion still shaped her body. The name Grace had given her seemed to hover over the room like a candle flame. Nova had not accepted it with any grand gesture. She had simply stopped stiffening every time Clara used it. For now, that was enough. Milo slept under Nova's chin, smaller than his siblings, his pale cream-gray fur still baby-soft, his ears folded like unfinished thoughts. The other 2 pups wriggled against their mother with more strength each hour. Milo was quieter. Too quiet sometimes. Ethan had learned to watch for the tiny rise of his ribs, the way he once watched for signals on a dark horizon. Ranger stayed near the treatment room doorway, his strong body stretched across the threshold like a living promise. His amber eyes moved from Nova to Ethan to the hall, never fully resting. Deputy Jonah Reed arrived just after 8 with coffee no one had asked for, and a face that said he had slept badly. Snow clung to the shoulders of his dark blue sheriff jacket. His fair skin was reddened by the cold, and his warm brown eyes carried the strained focus of a young man trying to do something right without yet knowing how much it would cost. "I requested the welfare inspection," Jonah said. Clara looked up from checking Nova's hydration. "And not approved yet." He set the coffee on the counter, untouched. "County wants more documentation. Haven Fields says the back areas are administrative storage, no active animal housing." Lydia sent a statement before breakfast. "Of course she did," Clara muttered. Ethan said nothing. He stood near the window, old military gray tactical shirt sleeves pushed just slightly above his wrists, the dark red thermal layer visible beneath. His face remained still, but inside, patience scraped against him like rusted wire. Jonah saw it. "If we move too fast, they'll turn this into trespassing, harassment, unstable veteran making accusations. Warren already tried that. Then don't help him prove it." The words were careful, but they landed hard. Ethan looked at Jonah. The deputy held his gaze. There was fear in him. Yes, but not cowardice. A man could carry both. Fear told you what the cliff was. Cowardice pushed someone else over it. Clara closed Nova's chart. "We need more than the ledger." Jonah nodded. "Something physical. Something not dependent on Miles alone." At the sound of Miles's name, Ethan looked toward the folder on Clara's desk. The old maintenance pages lay inside, copied and sealed. Miles had died 8 years ago, and carried the silence like a stone in his chest. Now the stone had been placed on the table, and still it was not enough. Ranger rose. No one had spoken to him. He moved to the rear exit of the clinic, not the one touched in the night, but the side door that opened toward the alley and the old service road beyond it. He stood there, nose lifted, ears forward. Ethan watched him. "What?" Jonah asked. Ranger looked back once. Clara sighed. "I have learned not to ignore that dog." The old service road behind the clinic curved toward the north edge of town. where the land dropped gently toward a narrow creek feeding the frozen lake. It was not a route tourists took. It passed behind storage sheds, closed bait shops, and a line of pines that held the wind in their branches. Jonah drove his patrol truck. Ethan followed in his own, with Ranger beside him. They did not go to Haven Fields directly. They went to the old North Haven boundary, to a strip of land Jonah said had once been used for supply deliveries, before the property disputes turned every fence line into a legal argument. Ranger led them on foot from there. Not magically, not like a prophet. He worked the snow nose low, body precise. At times he lost whatever faint trail he followed and circled back. At times he stopped at tire-packed ice, where old tracks had hardened beneath fresh powder. Ethan saw what the dog saw, only after a delay. Broken twigs at truck height, a strand of gray packing twine caught on brush, the impression of a gate chain dragged and dropped. They reached a small wooden hut near the creek. It had once been painted green, but weather had peeled the color down to gray. The roof sagged slightly, snow gathered along one side where the wind pushed it. No smoke, no fresh footprints at the door, not a place of active cruelty that somehow made it sadder. It looked like a place where things had been stored until everyone agreed not to remember them. Jonah checked the door. Not locked. Convenient? Clara asked. She had come, despite Ethan telling her the clinic needed her more. Forgotten, Ethan said, inside. The air was cold and stale. Ranger entered first, then stopped, allowing the humans to look. There were rusted food bowls stacked in a corner, a torn rubber mat, several bags of expired dog food hardened by moisture, and a metal storage bin with its lid half bent. No living animals, no dramatic horror, just neglect fossilized in ordinary objects. Jonah photographed everything before touching it. Clara crouched near the bin. May I? Jonah nodded. Inside were collars. Not many, but enough. Some leather, some nylon, a few with broken buckles. Several small metal tags lay at the bottom among damp papers. Clara lifted them with gloved fingers, one at a time. Buddy, Maple, Scout, Luna. The names were simple, cheerful, almost unbearable. Ranger sat beside the bin and lowered his head. Ethan felt the moment enter him quietly, the way cold entered through old scars. No bodies, no blood, nothing that shouted. Only names removed from necks and left to rust in a forgotten hut. And in that silence, the past seemed to breathe once. Not as a ghost, not as anything supernatural enough to comfort the living. As memory. Ethan imagined all the dogs who had worn those names, a tail thumping against a kennel wall, a nose pressed to a hand, a creature waiting for the next door to open and reveal kindness. Humans had 1,000 ways to rename abandonment: transfer, placement, program review, administrative storage. The dogs had only names, and even those had been dropped in a bin. Ranger suddenly nudged one tag with his nose. It spun on the wooden floor and stopped beside Ethan's boot. Scout. Ethan did not know why that one. Maybe it held a scent. Maybe it simply moved because Ranger touched it. But Jonah stared at it, and Clara went very still, and for one breath the hut felt like a courtroom where the smallest witness had finally been called. Jonah swallowed. I'll log all of this. Log the names, Ethan said. I will. No, Ethan said quietly, not just the items, the names. Jonah looked at him, then nodded. The names. Back at the clinic, Miles Ketter came in through the side door, with his knit cap in his hands and guilt already sitting on his shoulders. He looked older than the day before. His weathered face seemed hollowed out, his pale blue eyes sunk deep under a ridge of sleepless shame. Jonah showed him photographs of the hut and the tags. Miles sat down. I changed the lock on that place, he said, after the first winter fundraiser. Lydia said supplies had gone missing. Clara placed the tag photos in front of him. Miles touched one with a cracked fingertip. Maple. She was a sweet one, scared of men in hats. His voice broke and irritated him. He cleared his throat harshly. Scout had one white toe. Luna wouldn't eat unless someone sat near her. Ethan listened. This was not evidence in the way courts preferred, but it was truth returning to its body. Miles opened his maintenance ledger again. Together, he and Jonah matched several names to dates, kennel codes, and vehicle entries. The pattern was not complete, but it was no longer invisible. Late that afternoon, Grace Holloway arrived with a woman Ethan had never seen before. Tessa Monroe, Grace announced, as if dragging a reluctant cat into church. She used to make Haven Fields look like heaven. Now she's going to tell us where she hid the clouds. Tessa Monroe was 32, slim, with chestnut brown hair clipped back on one side, and pale winter skin that made the shadows under her eyes look bruised by lack of sleep. Her face was intelligent and tired, too young to look so practiced at regret. She wore a charcoal wool coat over a rust-colored knit sweater, dark jeans, practical ankle boots, and a simple crossbody satchel large enough for notebooks, a camera, and the kind of secrets people keep because they are not brave enough to burn them. "I didn't hide anything," Tessa said, then immediately looked ashamed of the sentence. Grace snorted. "That is a poor opening statement." Tessa's eyes moved to Nova. The dog lifted her head. Tessa stopped breathing properly. "Oh," she whispered. "It is her." Ethan did not step toward her. "You worked on the Hope campaign." Tessa nodded. "I wrote captions," she said, edited photos, scheduled posts, made donors cry in the right places. Her mouth twisted. That's what it felt like by the end. Clara asked gently, "Why come now?" Tessa looked at Grace, then at the box of donated towels stacked near the front desk. "Because I saw the sign at the bakery," she said. "And because for 2 years I told myself good outcomes could come from ugly methods if the money helped someone. But then I saw her picture." She looked at Nova again. "That wasn't an outcome. That was evidence." From her satchel, Tessa removed a flash drive and a folder of printed stills. No one spoke while she laid them out. There were public photos first. Hope beside Warren, children smiling, red scarf bright at her neck, captions about second chances. Then Tessa placed the unedited frames beside them. The difference was not dramatic enough for strangers to gasp. It was worse. It was subtle. Nova's eyes angled toward the exit. Her weight sat back. A staff member's hand held a lead just out of the cropped frame. Lydia's profile appeared in one image, adjusting the scarf. Warren smiled in the foreground, not looking at the dog at all. Then came the emails. Maintain hope in donor visible areas. Reduce unscripted guest interaction. Avoid reference to reproductive status. If hope cannot stabilize for donor-facing work, remove her from public rotation. Clara closed her eyes. Jonah's jaw flexed. Ethan read the last line twice and felt something inside him grow colder, clearer. Rage wanted fire. Clarity preferred ice. A small sound came from the treatment room. Milo. Clara turned first. The tiny pup had slipped away from Nova's warmth. His body was limp in a way no sleeping thing should be. Nova nudged him once, then again, sharper. A thin whine rose from her throat. Clara moved fast, but not wildly. Ethan, towel. Grace, warm pack. Jonah, clear the table, but don't bring him too far from her. Nova tried to rise, panicking, legs weak under her. Ranger moved between her and the table, not blocking, guiding. He lowered his head, making himself small, and gave a soft sound. Nova trembled, eyes locked on Milo. Ethan brought the towel. Clara worked with fierce quiet, warmth, gentle stimulation. A dropper, careful pressure, no shouting, no melodrama, only the terrible intimacy of a small life deciding whether to stay. Milo did not breathe. Then he did, a tiny gasp, another. Nova made a sound that seemed to come from some ancient place beneath language. Not joy, not relief yet. Recognition that the world had returned something it had almost taken. Clara held Milo close to Nova's side. The mother licked him once, then again, each movement weak and desperate and holy. No one in the room spoke. Even Grace did not joke. Ethan stood there holding the unused towel in both hands, unable to move. He had entered rooms after explosions. He had watched men drag breath back into themselves through blood and dust. But the sight of that tiny chest rising beneath Nova's chin nearly broke him, in a place war had only cracked. He understood then that this could not end with Warren losing face. It could not even end with Nova surviving. Somewhere, someday, another dog would be left behind by a system that knew how to sound kind while becoming cruel. And if no place existed to receive that dog before a Navy SEAL and a German Shepherd happened to pass by, then rescue would remain luck dressed as mercy. Ethan looked at Grace, Clara, Jonah, Miles, and Tessa, all imperfect, all frightened in different ways, all here. "We need a place," he said. Grace wiped one eye with the heel of her hand and pretended it was irritation. A place for what? For the place the ones, before the snow gets them. No one answered at first. Then Clara said that would take licensing. Jonah said county approval. Tessa said transparent funding. Miles said fencing, heat, drainage, better locks. Grace sniffed. And food. Because apparently every moral revolution starts with someone needing soup. Ethan looked down at Ranger. The shepherd's amber eyes met his, steady and tired and certain. Outside, winter pressed against the clinic windows. Inside, Milo breathed against his mother, and the room seemed to hold a fragile map of what came next. Jonah's phone buzzed. He read the message, then looked up. "The inspection request is moving," he said. "And there'll be a county behavioral evaluation for Nova." Soon, Ethan's gaze went to Nova. She was curled around Milo again, her body still trembling from the scare, her eyes watchful and exhausted. He hated the thought of taking her into a room full of people. Clara saw it on his face. "If we refuse, Warren uses that against us." "I know, we set terms," Jonah said. "No pups, no crowding, no touching, no applause." Near an exit. Tessa looked at the unedited photographs, still spread on the counter. "And no one calls her Hope." Ethan nodded. Nova lowered her head over Milo, as if hiding him from a world that had not yet earned the right to look. Chapter 5 ended not with victory, but with breath. Milo's breath. Nova's breath. The breath of a town beginning to understand that kindness without structure was only a candle in a storm. And candles, no matter how sacred, the community hall of Brightwater Ridge stood beside the frozen lake like an old white ship pulled onto land and forgotten there. By winter daylight, it looked almost harmless. Its paint peeled at the window frames. The front steps had been salted unevenly. A hand-painted board near the door advertised quilting night, town council meetings, a blood drive from last November, and a notice about snowmobile safety, written in marker by someone who had run out of patience halfway through the word responsibility. Ethan Calder arrived early. He did not come early to look cooperative. He came because Nova deserved to meet the room before the room met her. The hall smelled of old wood, floor polish, damp wool coats, weak coffee, and the faint metallic scent of folding chairs stored too long in a cold closet. Winter sun came through the tall windows in pale rectangles. Outside, the frozen lake reflected a hard blue sky. Inside, every sound seemed too large. The scrape of chair legs, the click of the thermostat, the soft buzz of fluorescent lights above the council table. Ethan walked the perimeter first, old habit, new purpose. He noted the doors, the windows, the side hallway, the space between the front table and the seating area. He chose a corner near the rear exit, not hidden, not central. A place with distance, airflow, and a clear path out if Nova needed to leave. He spread a thick gray blanket over the floor. Clara had washed it with unscented soap and warmed it in her truck before they came. Nova stood beside him, trembling so lightly, most people would miss it. Ethan did not. The German Shepherd mother was cleaner now, but not healed. Her gray-brown cream coat had been brushed only as much as she allowed. Her body was still thin, though not as sharply as before. Her amber eyes moved from the windows to the rows of chairs, then to the council table, then back to Ethan's hands. She wore no red cloth, no decorative collar, no symbol chosen by humans, only a loose temporary lead attached to a plain, soft harness Clara had approved. Ranger lay down between Nova and the open room. The 6-year-old German Shepherd folded his strong cream-gray body into stillness, black saddle dark along his back, amber eyes steady. His black harness with dark red trim remained on, the handle catching the light. He looked less like a dog waiting for command and more like an old guardian deciding which mortals were worth tolerating. Ethan crouched near Nova, not touching. "Just a room," he said softly. Nova did not believe him. He could not blame her. Rooms had done too much pretending, Doctor. Clara Whitmore arrived carrying a brown medical bag, a folder of printed records, and the expression of a woman prepared to dislike everyone equally if necessary. Her faded blue-gray veterinary coat was buttoned over a cream sweater, dark jeans tucked into brown anti-slip boots dusted with salt. Her dark hair was tied low, loose strands at her temples, her gray-brown eyes tired but fierce. "No pups," she said, confirming what they had agreed. "No pups," Ethan replied. The puppies were safe at the clinic with Grace Holloway, who had claimed she was not a nursery worker for 3 barking dumplings, before wrapping Milo in a towel like a crown prince. Deputy Jonah Reed came next, shoulders stiff under his dark blue winter sheriff jacket. He carried a folder, a county form, and the burden of being young in a room full of older fear. His fair skin was flushed from the cold blonde-brown hair, neat, warm brown eyes serious. He checked the setup, then nodded. "I told them no crowding," he said. "No approaching the dog without permission. No applause." "Good," Clara said. "If they forget, I bite first." Jonah almost smiled. The town began to enter slowly. People came in with lowered voices, as if walking into trouble. Shop owners, retired couples, 2 veterans from the breakfast program, parents who had once brought children to Haven Fields events. They sat carefully, glanced at Nova, then away. Compassion and guilt made poor eye contact. Grace arrived last among Ethan's people, carrying a thermos and wearing a thick cream sweater beneath her flour-dusted apron, moss-green scarf wrapped twice around her neck. Her brown and silver hair was pinned in a low bun that looked one argument away from collapse. Her sharp eyes scanned the room. "Cheerful place," she muttered, "like a funeral home that ran out of flowers." Then Warren Holt entered. The room changed. It was not dramatic. No one gasped. But backs straightened, conversations thinned. Some people looked relieved to see him, which told Ethan how deep the habit went. Dr. Warren Holt wore a premium charcoal winter coat over a black turtleneck and dark trousers, silver-gray hair neatly combed, polished face arranged into dignified concern. His blue-gray eyes were calm, public-facing, almost sorrowful. Beside him stood Lydia Crane, slender and severe, in a dark tailored coat, black turtleneck, slim trousers, and clean ankle boots. Her ash-brown hair sat in a neat low bun. She held a folder flat against her ribs, like a shield made of paperwork. Warren looked first at the council table, not at Nova. That told Ethan enough. Chairwoman Colleen Marsh called the meeting to order. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a square face, short iron-gray hair, and the exhausted authority of someone who had chaired too many meetings about plowing budgets and not enough about conscience. She wore a navy cardigan over a white blouse, reading glasses on a chain, and the look of a person hoping procedure might keep the room from catching fire. "This is a county behavioral review and preliminary custody discussion," Colleen said. "It is not a trial. It is not a final court determination. Everyone will remain civil." Grace leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "That means someone here is about to be uncivil in a suit." Warren stood smoothly. "Chairwoman Marsh, thank you," he said. "All of us at Haven Fields care deeply about public safety, animal welfare, and the emotional needs of this community." Ethan kept his hand open on his knee. Nova leaned closer to Ranger. Warren spoke of responsibility, of incomplete behavioral records, of children, of veterans, of trauma, carefully framed as danger when convenient. He never raised his voice. He did not need to. Every sentence came wrapped in velvet, sliding between fear and reason. Then Lydia took over. She referred to Nova as the animal formerly identified as Hope. She spoke of program assets, liability exposure, community-facing work, and proper evaluation standards. The words were clean, too clean. They made suffering sound like a filing error. Nova's ears flattened at the sound of Hope. Ethan saw it. So did Clara. Ranger lifted his head slightly, eyes moving from Lydia to Nova. Then the microphone squealed. It was an ordinary sound born of bad wiring and worse luck. A sharp, high shriek split the room, bounced off the old wooden walls, and vanished as quickly as it came. Nova exploded backward, not toward anyone. Away. Her body slammed against Ethan's leg. Her paws scrambled on the blanket. Her lips lifted, teeth flashing for one bright second, not with attack but terror. Her breath came hard and shallow. Chairs creaked. Someone gasped. A woman near the front pulled her purse closer as if fear were contagious. Warren stopped speaking. For the first time, he did not need words. The room began writing the story for him. Dangerous dog. Unstable. Former program animal. Public safety. Ethan felt every eye turn toward him, waiting for the wrong move. His body knew how to seize control, tighten the lead, command. Dominate the moment before someone else did. He did none of it. He lowered himself slowly, not in front of Nova, not over her, beside her, smaller, less like a wall, more like weather that would pass. His hand opened near his thigh, palm empty. Ranger lay down first. The big German shepherd, trained, steady, scarred by no visible wound, but wise in the language of fear, placed his chin on the wooden floor and gave one slow breath. Not command. Invitation. Nova saw him. Her body shook so hard the lead trembled against Ethan's fingers. Her eyes moved from Ranger's stillness to Ethan's open hand. For one long breath, she remained suspended between the old room in her memory and the present room beneath her paws. Then she sat, not gracefully, not calmly. She sat trembling, head low, eyes wide, ribs moving fast beneath her coat. But she sat. She did not lunge. She did not bite. She did not cross the distance toward anyone. Silence filled the hall more powerfully than shouting could have. Clara stood. "That," she said, voice clear, "is a trauma response, not aggression." Lydia opened her mouth. Clara turned toward her. A dog intending harm closes distance. Nova tried to escape. When given space, a known calming presence, and no force, she did not escalate. Warren's face remained composed, but his eyes cooled. Jonah stepped forward next. His voice was not loud, but it did not shake. "My initial report confirms the dog was found underweight, dehydrated, and in need of care, Doctor. Whitmore's records show no unprovoked attack behavior since rescue. We also have physical evidence connecting her to the former North Haven program under code H17. He laid the folder on the council table. Miles Ketter rose from a back row. He looked smaller in the hall than he had on his porch. His old dark brown canvas jacket hung from his still broad shoulders. His gray knit cap twisted in his cracked hands. His hollow face carried the color of old guilt. "I opened the back gate the night Hope was moved," he said. The hall stirred. Miles swallowed. Lydia Crane ordered it. "I logged the van plate. I signed transfer completed. I didn't check where she went. I told myself it wasn't my job." His voice broke, but he continued. "That was a lie I used, because it was easier than being brave. No one moved. Tessa Monroe stood after him, pale and slim in her charcoal coat, chestnut brown hair clipped back on one side, her satchel hanging at her hip. She connected her laptop to the old projector with Jonah's help. The machine flickered, coughed, and finally threw light onto the pull-down screen. First came the public image. Hope beside Warren. Red scarf. Children smiling. A caption about healing. Then the unedited frame. The lead in a staff member's hand. Nova's body angled away, her eyes fixed on an exit. Lydia adjusting the red fabric at the neck. Warren smiling in the foreground, not looking down. Photo after photo. The truth did not shout. It accumulated. Tessa's voice was thin but steady. I cropped the fear out. I wrote the captions. I told myself the money helped other dogs. She looked at the council table. I was wrong. Lydia stood. These materials are internal and potentially taken in violation of contractual confidentiality. Grace barked a laugh. There it is. The dog suffered, but heaven saved the paperwork. A few people murmured. Then a woman in the third row stood. She was in her mid-30s, small and tired-looking, with dark blonde hair tucked under a knit hat and a child's hand gripping her coat. Ethan recognized neither of them. The boy beside her looked about 9, thin, with pale cheeks and large, anxious eyes. His name, she said, was Sam Whitlow. My son attended one of the Haven Fields events, the woman said. He came home upset. He said the dog with the red scarf was pulled behind the curtain because she wouldn't stand still. Sam looked at the floor. His mother squeezed his shoulder. You don't have to say anything. But the boy lifted his eyes toward Nova. His voice was tiny. I thought if grown-ups didn't say anything, then maybe it was normal. No one breathed for a second. Nova did not understand the words. But Ethan did. So did the town. Grace wiped at one eye and growled. A town that needs a child to remind it what wrong looks like has burned the whole batch. This time, no one laughed. Colleen Marsh removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. When she put them back on, her voice had changed. Pending further investigation, this council will not recommend emergency removal of Nova from current veterinary-supported care. County Animal Services will proceed with documentation. Haven Fields will suspend animal-related public programming until records are reviewed. Miss Crane, all transfer files connected to North Haven Code H17 and related animals are to be submitted. Warren stood very still. Lydia's face tightened by a single, precise fraction. It was not victory, not yet. No one was arrested. No grand justice thundered through the rafters. But something older than law moved through the hall. The moment when a community stopped mistaking a polished voice for truth. Ethan led Nova outside before anyone could approach her. Snow had begun again, soft and light. The lake lay quiet beyond the hall, frozen under a pale sky. Nova stepped carefully onto the packed snow, trembling but moving. Ranger walked ahead, then slowed so she could follow. Ethan did not look back at Warren. For today, that was enough. Nova had entered a room built from fear and left it still herself. Not hope, not an asset, not a symbol. Nova, and beside her, Ranger's paw prints marked the snow like a path the town had only just begun. Spring did not arrive in Brightwater Ridge like a trumpet. It came shyly, almost apologetically. Beneath the last crusts of snow, it loosened the ice along the lake one silver crack at a time. It darkened the road banks with thawing earth. It made the pine branches drip in the morning sun, each drop falling like a small clock, counting the town back into motion. The investigation into Haven Fields had not ended with a dramatic arrest. Real life rarely gave justice that kind of theatrical timing. Dr. Warren Holt lost donors first, then contracts, then the comfortable silence that had once wrapped around his name like a clean winter coat. County officials reviewed Haven Fields' animal-related programs. Lydia Crane was ordered to transfer records connected to North Haven. including files marked under the old H codes. Lawyers appeared. Meetings multiplied. Some people in town claimed they had always wondered. Others avoided saying anything at all. Ethan Calder did not spend much time listening to either kind. He had work to do. The old shed where he had first found Nova and her puppies no longer looked like a place waiting to be forgotten. Its broken boards had been replaced. The roof had been patched. The drafts along the lower walls were sealed with new lumber and insulation. A small fenced run stretched behind it, still muddy in places but safe. The sign over the entrance was plain wood, hand-burned by Miles Ketter, with letters that leaned slightly to the left. Ridge Haven Winter Shelter. Below it, in smaller words, Tessa Monroe had painted the sentence that had become the shelter's law before it became its motto. No animal is a symbol first. Every life deserves a safe name. Ethan stood beneath that sign on a cold morning bright enough to make the whole world squint. He was still dressed like a man who trusted usefulness more than polish. Old military gray tactical combat shirt softened with wear, dark red thermal shirt showing at the collar and cuffs, earth brown and moss green combat pants scuffed at the knees, old military work boots darkened by thawing mud, scratched watch on his wrist. His clean-shaven face looked no less disciplined than before, square jaw set, gray-blue eyes steady beneath his dark brown military-cut hair. But something in him had shifted, not softened exactly. Opened, perhaps. Ranger noticed before anyone else did. The 6-year-old German shepherd stood at Ethan's left, cream-gray coat catching the pale sun, natural black along his back and ears, amber eyes alert. His black harness, with dark red trim, had been brushed clean that morning, though a streak of mud already marked one strap. Ranger looked over the yard with the solemn dignity of a general inspecting troops, which was impressive, considering one of the troops was Milo attempting to murder a bootlace. Milo had survived. That fact still felt like a miracle too small for the word miracle and too large for any ordinary sentence. The little German shepherd mix puppy was rounder now, soft pale cream-gray fur fluffed out in uneven tufts, light brown tones showing around his ears and paws. His eyes were dark, lively, and full of criminal intent. He had one ear trying to rise and one ear committed to comedy. He attacked Ethan's left bootlace with the intensity of a creature born to diffuse explosives, growling in tiny bursts while tugging backward with his whole body. Ethan looked down. That lace has a family. Milo sneezed and bit harder. Ranger gave Ethan a look that clearly said, "Young recruits lack discipline." "I know," Ethan murmured. "You were never this bad." Ranger looked away with the noble silence of a liar. Nova lay on the porch near the open shelter door. She was not the same dog Ethan had carried out of the old shed, but she was not magically remade either. Healing had not turned her into a symbol of perfect recovery. Her gray-brown cream coat had filled out, though the fur around her neck still grew unevenly where the old mark had been. Her body was stronger. Her amber eyes remained guarded. She still disliked sudden sounds. She still moved away from red cloth. She still watched hands. But now, when she moved away, no one followed. That was the difference. Her 2 other puppies tumbled beside her, healthier and bolder than Milo, their small bodies colliding and rolling across the boards like wind-blown mittens. Nova lifted her head whenever one squeaked too sharply. She did not panic. She counted. 1, 2, 3. All there, all breathing. Inside the shelter, Dr. Clara Whitmore arranged medical supplies in a cabinet that refused to close unless kicked at a specific angle. Clara was still practical, still tired, still built of equal parts skill and stubbornness. Her faded blue-gray veterinary coat hung over a chair while she worked in a cream sweater and dark jeans, dark hair tied low with loose strands at her temples. She had agreed to serve as part-time medical director only after warning Ethan that if anyone called it heartwarming. She would invoice them for emotional labor. Deputy Jonah Reed was outside near the fence, helping Miles check the new gate latch. Jonah's dark blue sheriff jacket was open in the warming air, his blonde-brown hair neat as always, his young, serious face less burdened than it had been at the hearing. He still carried caution, but no longer hid behind it. Miles Ketter knelt beside the gate with a screwdriver, his gray knit cap pushed back, red-black flannel visible beneath his old brown canvas jacket. His cracked hands moved carefully over the latch. Every hinge he fixed seemed to cost him something and return something too. He had not asked for forgiveness. He showed up early, stayed late, and made things hold. Grace Holloway arrived with a tray of biscuits shaped like bones and a warning. "These are for donors," she announced, "not dogs. Not emotionally confused Navy SEALs. Not deputies with guilty eyes." Jonah looked up. "I didn't say anything." "Exactly. Suspicious." Grace was in her thick cream sweater, flour-dusted apron, dark pants, low boots and moss-green scarf, though spring had already made the scarf unnecessary. Her brown and silver hair was in its usual low bun, which looked like it had survived war, weather, and several bad opinions. She placed the tray on a folding table near the door, then immediately slipped a smaller, dog-safe biscuit into Ranger's mouth. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Grace stared back. "He supervises." Ranger chewed once slowly, with the solemnity of royalty receiving tribute. Tessa Monroe moved through the yard with a clipboard and a camera hanging from her neck, though she did not lift the camera unless someone agreed. The former Haven Fields media worker looked different in the open air. Her chestnut brown hair was clipped back on one side. Her charcoal coat replaced by a practical canvas jacket over a rust sweater. Her face still tired but less haunted. She had written the shelter's donation page with rules Ethan insisted on. No images of animals in their worst moments, no invented names for drama, no pain turned into advertising. "Transparency is less catchy," Tessa had said. "Good," Ethan had answered. Now she had made a board near the entrance listing every donation and expense. People stopped to read it. Some looked surprised. Some looked ashamed. Some looked relieved. The first adoption day was not a festival. Ethan had refused banners, balloons, applause, and anything that felt like a performance. But people came anyway. Families came in winter, coats left open to the spring air. Veterans came with hands tucked in pockets and expressions too careful. Children came carrying paper drawings. An older widower asked about a 12-year-old hound mix, who mostly wanted a couch and low expectations. A teenage girl sat quietly near a nervous terrier for 20 minutes without touching him, and when he finally leaned against her boot, her eyes filled with tears she pretended were allergies. Near the porch, Sam Whitlow stood with his mother. Sam was still thin, still solemn-eyed, with pale cheeks and a boy's careful way of making himself smaller around adult guilt. His mother, the small, dark blonde woman who had spoken at the hearing, kept one hand near his shoulder, but did not push him forward. She had learned, perhaps from Ethan, perhaps from Nova, that courage forced too hard could become another kind of fear. Sam looked at Nova. Nova looked at Sam. The space between them felt longer than the yard. Ethan crouched beside the boy. "Remember what we practiced?" Sam nodded. "Don't walk straight at her. Don't stare too much. Let her choose." "Good. Will she remember me?" Ethan looked at Nova. Her ears had shifted forward slightly. Not relaxed, not alarmed. "Maybe," he said. "But what matters is what you do now." Sam absorbed that with the seriousness of a child being handed a sword from an old legend. He walked to the porch steps and sat down sideways, hands resting on his own knees. He did not reach. He did not call. He looked toward the yard instead of directly at Nova. The shelter quieted around them. No one had ordered silence. It arrived on its own, as if the whole town had learned that not every holy thing needed music. Nova stood. Milo stopped mauling Ethan's bootlace. Ranger lifted his head. Nova took one step toward the boy, then stopped. Her body remembered rooms, cameras, hands, a red scarf, applause that had once meant being kept still until fear behaved. Her eyes moved to Ethan, then to Ranger. Ranger did nothing dramatic. He simply blinked slowly and lowered his head again. Nova took another step, then another. At last, she reached Sam and lowered her muzzle to his knee. The boy did not move. Nova rested her chin there, just for a moment. It was not forgiveness for everyone. It was not proof that pain had vanished. It was only one living creature choosing one small safe place in the world. But the yard held its breath, as if spring itself had paused to see. Grace whispered, "Anyone claps and I throw biscuits at their head." A few people laughed softly, the sound small enough not to frighten Nova. Sam's eyes shone. He did not touch her until Ethan nodded. Then he lifted one hand slowly and let Nova smell his fingers. She did. Then she stepped back to her porch, not fleeing, simply returning to herself. A dog once forced to stand as a symbol had chosen, freely and quietly, to offer trust to a child who had once believed adult silence meant everything was normal. Ethan felt something move in his chest, not breaking this time, but settling into place. Later, when the families had gone and the shelter yard was marked with footprints, paw prints, spilled kibble, and the first muddy signs of spring, Ethan stood by the fence with Ranger. The lake glimmered through the trees. The old North Haven land no longer felt like a graveyard. Not yet a sanctuary, not fully, but no longer a hiding place. Clara locked the medical cabinet with a satisfied kick. Jonah folded chairs. Miles checked the gate one more time. Tessa updated the donation board. Grace packed leftover biscuits while claiming none of this had made her emotional, despite threatening a napkin with unnecessary force. Nova lay on the porch with her puppies pressed against her side. Milo slept on his back, paws twitching as if chasing some heroic bootlace in dreams. Ranger watched them with the weary tolerance of an old guardian whose kingdom had become overrun by small fools. Ethan placed one hand on the fence post. He had once thought bravery meant moving toward danger. Sometimes it did. But this was different. This was slower, harder in ways that did not photograph well. Staying, building, letting others help. Teaching people not to confuse pity with care. Making a place where the next frightened animal did not need luck to survive. Ranger leaned against his leg. Not hard, just enough. Ethan looked down at him. "You knew before I did." Ranger's amber eyes held his for one quiet second. Then Milo woke, charged across the porch, tripped over his own feet, and slammed gently into Ranger's front leg. The old shepherd closed his eyes. Ethan laughed. It surprised him, the sound. Not because he never laughed, but because this one came without permission from sorrow. It rose cleanly into the thawing air and disappeared among the pines. Under the bright northern sky, Ridge Haven Winter Shelter stood on repaired boards, patched walls, donated blankets, signed forms, old guilt, new courage, and the stubborn mercy of people who had finally stopped looking away. Ethan had not saved the whole world, no man did, but a Navy SEAL, a German Shepherd, a mother dog, and a town that had remembered its spine, had built one doorway through which the forgotten could come in from the cold. And sometimes, one doorway was how a bed, not always the kind that splits the sky open. Sometimes it is smaller. A frightened dog taking one step closer. A wounded heart choosing to trust again. A tired person deciding not to look away. A town remembering that kindness is not just a feeling but a responsibility. Maybe God places these moments in our ordinary lives to remind us that no act of mercy is ever wasted. A bowl of food, a warm blanket, a patient hand, a voice that speaks for the voiceless. These small things can become the doorway through which hope returns. So when life feels cold, remember Nova, remember Ranger, remember Ethan. The world does not always need someone perfect. Sometimes it only needs someone willing to stay, to help, and to build a little shelter against the storm. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who still believes compassion can change a life. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. And if you have ever seen a small act of kindness become something much bigger, subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories about courage, loyalty, healing, and the quiet miracles God leaves along our path. May God bless you. Protect your family and guide your heart toward kindness every day.